Hello, I'm Bernard Norcott-Mahany. I am your instructor for Classical Mythology this summer, and welcome to the class. I just wanted to go over a couple things. I have some videos on material already posted, but I'm going to this term try to post once each week, usually covering at least one of the Greek works that we'll be discussing in that particular week. So that for this first week, you've got the lights just came on. You've got chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1 is really an introduction, and you can almost skip that. I would check at least the PowerPoint that's available that covers chapter 1, so at least you get the gist of what's in there. But you don't need, I think, to spend any more time on it than that. But chapter 2, of course, is important. Now, the book we're using is this book, Classical Mythology in Context, 2nd edition by Lisa Mercione, and it has Hades on the cover. So there is an earlier one that has Athena on the cover. That will not actually help you. The first chapter, first few chapters, it'll be okay. But then in chapter 3, already as early as chapter 3, it's going to cover different material, and so you won't know half the questions on the test. So get edition 2, get it as soon as you possibly can. Now, if you cannot get the book this first week, there's still work to do. So what I would say is you can find in the module for chapter 2, you can find a translation of Hesiod's Theogony, and it's actually it's a different translation, but it's got a commentary by me. So in other words, I footnoted, I read through it, and every time I thought there was something worth talking about, I footnoted it, and I've got a footnote about it. So you can get the Theogony read. If you don't get anything else read, you can at least get that read. So I would advise you to do what you can based on the module if you don't have the book, and then make sure you read the Theogony at bare minimum. All right, so the work at any rate that we'll be looking at, the Greek work we'll be looking at, is Hesiod's Theogony. Now Hesiod, we don't really know anything about him. He tells us stuff in the 2 poems, the Theogony and the Works and Days. He tells us something about himself, but this seems to be just a conceit. In other words, he is playing a part before an audience, and the Hesiod of the 2 works doesn't really match, and so I think we can't take any of that as actually historically relevant. He seems to have been from north central Greece, from an area called Boeotia. He was composing in the late 8th century, so the 700s BCE. So he's around the same time as Homer. Some people think the Theogony is older than Homer, older than the Iliad, which is the older of the 2 works. Some think it's after that. It doesn't matter. It's around the same time, and it's still the same sort of world. So you've got Greece coming out of the Dark Ages, coming out of a period of material poverty, and things aren't going very well, into relative stability. Greece is starting to trade. It's starting to send out colonies around the Mediterranean. So the Greek world is sort of expanding again, whereas it had shrunk. So that's the period where both Homer and Hesiod are composing. He likely recited the work, the Theogony and the Works and Days. He likely recited them at festivals where he would have had then a larger audience. But he also might have done it, for wealthy people, like for dinner entertainment type thing. And every performance that he would have done would have been different. If you've ever seen performers who have like really long songs, oftentimes what they'll do is in performance, they might not want to do a 15-minute version of something. So what you might get is a 5-minute version that has parts of that, but not the whole thing. And my guess is that performances of the Theogony probably were like that. You weren't getting exactly this work in any one performance. Now, the work as we have it would take about 2 hours or so to recite aloud. And so, that could be an afternoon's entertainment. If it's an after-dinner entertainment, presumably it'd be shorter. Okay. It's important to know a little bit about Hesiod's worldview. So what did Hesiod think the world was like? Well, first of all, cosmologically, what he thought the world was like was the world that we live on, the Earth, was basically a disk. And around that disk, so it was basically flat. I mean, there were mountains and stuff, so there were high points and low points, but it was basically relatively flat surface. Around that circle of land was the river ocean, and if you went out into the ocean, the river ocean, by which he would have thought the Atlantic, if you went too far, then presumably you'd either fall off the edge or you'd hit a wall, at the edge. Above it is the sky, which was imagined by Hesiod to be a dome that was solid. So I guess, if you shot a rocket into the sky, it would actually bounce off this dome. Obviously, Hesiod knew nothing about rockets, but it's higher than a human can touch, but it is still a dome. So it is something solid. And then the Tartarus, the underworld, is a bowl underneath the earth. So you basically have a sphere that is cut in half by the disk that is Earth. So keep that in mind when you're reading it. That's the way he's imagining the world. We'll talk a little bit more about his sort of overall attitude about things. Figures that become important early on are the muses. They first appear within the first 10-15 lines of the poem. Hesiod spends the first 200 lines or so of the poem, so a good 10 minutes, 12 minutes of the poem, just sort of introducing the muses and how the muses once came to him while he was tending sheep and inspired him to become a singer. Right, so that's the sort of the first story that he tells is of the muses coming to see him. So these are 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, who's the goddess of memory. And of course, if you're an oral poet, memory is really important because you're an oral poet. There is no writing. So what you know is what you know. If you get up in performance, the worst thing that can happen to you is you have a brain freeze. If you get up there and you start to sing and then you stop, that's it. They ain't gonna have you back. They didn't have a hook to pull you off, but your performance was in effect over. So it was important, even if it was just it's like some people will pray to God. They may not actually believe in a deity, but they grew up with that. And so they have to do something like give a talk or do something, and they'll pray to God, please God, make sure I don't mess up. Well, that's sort of what Hesiod does with the muses, right? They're his inspiration, but they're also sort of like his bedrock thing. I need you guys. I need you to help me remember the material. And there were all sorts of things in oral poetry. There are all sorts of ways to remember stuff. You're not going to remember word for word exactly the way we think of word for word. You would know the story, you would have the building blocks to make the story, and then you could put it together in performance. Rap performers can do that sort of thing as well, right? So the overall story, now when you read it, you're going to say, boy, this is sort of confusing because he's talking about the muses, then he's talking about this, then he's talking about Hecate, and he's doing this other stuff, and what's going on here? Keep in mind that the overall story, the story arc, is really about the rise of Zeus. That's the, if there is a story arc for the whole thing, that's it. Now, there are some other things that don't quite fit that. This is not a neat story in the way that Homer's Iliad and Homer's Odyssey are very neat. Pretty much everything fits very nicely into a nice story arc that tells the story. It's very logical. I mean, when you consider how old it is, it's amazing how easy it is to follow as far as the narrative. The theogony is not that. It's sort of a mix of things. And does that reflect an actual performance? Don't know. It could reflect a performance. but it might also be sort of like a greatest hits thing. He's got different things in here that were put together when the work was finally quote unquote published. And we don't know when that was. We don't know when it was actually written down. My guess is it was not written down in his lifetime. So this would have been something that he would have told. Versions of it would have continued, and at some point that would have been set to writing. But the Greeks discover a writing system, the writing system that we know is Greek, that they got from the Phoenicians, and they got that sometime in the 8th century. So they got it maybe around 780, 770 BCE. It's going to take a long while for them to get to a point where they can set something to writing. Like they can do inscriptions, they can do like, this cow is owned by, me, or that type of thing. They could those sort of simple things they could do. But anything more elaborate than that takes a long time to get to a point where you're actually familiar with writing. Okay, so the rise of Zeus is sort of this key thing, and Zeus, of course, is the chief god for Hesiod, and so things have led up to this point. Now he's in charge, right? That's the story arc, and that's a good thing because Zeus brings order. Now, Zeus is not presented as a 100% nice guy. He is less barbaric than his dad, Cronus, and way less barbaric than his grandfather, Uranus, Sky. But he's still, there's some cruelty, there's some other stuff there. But the point is, for the most part, he's even-handed, and he brings order. And if you've got order, then you can expect stuff. If it's total disorder, if it's chaos, then everything's up for grabs. There's nothing that you know for sure. There's nothing you can count on. And you can't really build in a world like that, right? There's no development in a world like that. You keep on going back to square one because you can't get anywhere because of the chaos. So Zeus brings order, and that's a good thing. And chaos is sort of the opposite of order. Order is cosmos. Chaos is sort of the opposite of that. He also, like the overall thing in both the Works and Days and in the Theogony. Now, these may not be by the same author, but they are certainly from the same sort of area, and they reflect a similar point of view. So life is tough. In the Theogony, Hesiod clearly thinks that life is sort of difficult. It's maybe not quite life sucks, then you die, but it's close. But life is still, there's something there, right? If you're alive, you want to be alive. You don't really want to be dead, because the world of the dead is just boring and awful. I mean, there's nothing to it. So life is tough, but we have order. Things are moving forward. There's a sense that things are getting better. They may still suck, but they're getting better. And that's also sort of important. Now, Hesiod overall is a pessimist. Overall, the Greeks are pessimistic. The Greeks tend to view the world as sort of governed by luck. Luck or chance seems to play a real big role in the Greek worldview. The Romans seem to view things more in terms of destiny. Rome has a destiny. And if you're on the same boat as Rome, then things are probably going to work out overall for you pretty well. If you run up against Rome in some way, you're going to get steamrolled. So you as an individual might not have a destiny, but Rome has a destiny, and that brings a different sort of sense of order to the Romans, who tend to be optimistic because they figure Rome's never going to fall. And in a sense, Rome never really did totally collapse. Rome has been a population center since it was founded sometime in the 8th century. So just sort of keep that in mind. So the Greeks tend to be sort of pessimistic. A lot of Greeks have the view that, life sucks, then you die. And death is terrible because the underworld is sort of like this gray place that lacks the thing that made life exciting. And if you've lost that, it's like, then what's the point? So that's just a sort of brief introduction. I did want to say hello. Again, I'm Bernard Norcott-Mahany, your instructor. I will be, sending you links to these videos on YouTube each week. But I'll be looking at like the one key work or the two key works that we'll be looking at that week. So that'll give you some sort of heads up. There are other videos that I've done in the past. Those are also available there in the announcements. You can see links to those. And there are lectures, both just PowerPoint things that I saved to PDF, and recordings of lectures that I did that came from Maurizio herself, Maurizio's own sort of lecture notes that the publisher provided. So I basically do a commentary on those as PowerPoint. So if you don't have PowerPoint, those won't be entirely helpful to you. All right, so take care. I will be in touch with you on Monday to set up the first week's bunch of assignments. The key thing in the class is going to be getting to the work and then doing the work. If you slack off, it will come back to bite you. So don't do that. Try to keep on top of it. If you can't get it all done, get as much as you can done. Just sort of try to keep on top of it. It's basically like as if you had a job and you're trying to just stay ahead of the workflow. Do that as best you can, and you will have a successful semester. So take care.